The crystalline spires of the Valtheris Palace caught the light of 3 moons, casting prismatic shadows across the obsidian floors. Ethan Drake wiped grease from his hands, finishing the final calibration on the gravity stabilizer. As the human maintenance engineer assigned to the royal wing, he'd grown accustomed to being invisible, just another servant keeping the ancient technology running. Human. The voice cut through the humming machinery like a blade through silk. Ethan turned to find Princess Calith standing in the doorway, her iridescent skin shimmering violet in the dim light. She was breathtaking in a way that made his throat tighten, tall and elegant, with eyes that held galaxies within them. The other engineers whispered that she could read thoughts, that her touch could burn or heal depending on her mood. "Your Highness," he stammered, dropping to one knee as protocol demanded. She glided closer, her long silver hair flowing as though moved by an invisible current. "Rise. I have no patience for ceremony tonight." Her accent carried the musical quality of her native tongue, each word carefully shaped. "I require your presence." "Of course. Is there an equipment malfunction in my private chambers?" She leaned closer, and he could smell something like moonflowers and ozone. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Come to my room after dark, human. Alone. Tell no one." Before he could respond, she swept from the room, leaving only the faint scent of her presence and the sound of his hammering heart. Ethan stared at the empty doorway, his mind racing. In the 6 months he'd worked here, he'd learned enough about Valtharian politics to know that private audiences with royalty were never innocent. Was this a test? The palace was a labyrinth of competing factions. Her 3 brothers all vied for their dying father's throne, and Princess Calith was considered the dark horse, too young and too female by traditional standards. Had someone discovered his unauthorized access to the archive systems last week? He'd only been searching for technical manuals, but perhaps the security AI had flagged him. Perhaps she meant to question him. Or worse. As the palace bells chimed the 20th hour, Ethan made his decision. Curiosity and a strange, inexplicable pull toward the princess won out over caution. He changed from his work coveralls into the simple black tunic provided to all human staff, checked that his access pass was secure, and slipped into the corridor. The palace transformed after dark. The bright, bustling halls became shadowy passages where every alcove might hide a spy or an assassin. Ethan kept to the service corridors, his heart pounding with each step. Through the transparent sections of wall, he glimpsed the throne room where courtiers still gathered, their whispered conversations creating a susurrus that reminded him of snakes. He climbed the spiral staircase to the royal wing, where guards in ceremonial armor stood at attention. They didn't stop him. His maintenance access granted him passage nearly everywhere, but their eyes tracked him with unmistakable suspicion. Princess Calith's door was unmarked, identified only by the constellation symbol etched into the dark metal. Ethan raised his hand to knock, hesitated, then pressed his palm against the panel. It recognized his biometrics. She'd added him to her security clearance, and slid open with a soft hiss. "Enter quickly," her voice called from within, "and seal the door behind you." The princess's chambers defied every expectation. Ethan had imagined opulent furnishings and alien luxury, but instead found something closer to a war room. Holographic displays floated throughout the space, showing star charts, political networks, and what appeared to be surveillance footage. The only concessions to comfort were the low couches scattered around a central pool of luminescent water. Princess Calith stood at the far window, her back to him, gazing out at the capital city spreading below like a carpet of lights. She wore something simpler than her court attire, a flowing garment that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue, leaving her shoulders bare. Her skin seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. "Lock it," she said without turning. "The encryption seal, not the standard lock." Ethan found the secondary panel and activated the military-grade seal he'd only seen used in the highest security areas. The door hummed, and a barely visible energy field shimmered across it. "Do you know why you're here, Ethan Drake?" She turned to face him, and in the low light, her eyes seemed to actually glow with an inner fire. "No, Your Highness." "Don't lie to me." She crossed the room in 3 fluid strides, stopping close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. You've been accessing restricted files. The engineering archives, yes, but also the historical records. The sealed documents about the First Contact War. His blood ran cold. I was curious about the technology. I didn't think. You didn't think anyone would notice a human digging into the most painful chapter of our shared history? Her hand shot out and gripped his chin, tilting his face up to meet her gaze. Her touch was warm, almost feverish. Or perhaps you knew exactly what you were doing. I swear, I meant no harm. I just wanted to understand. Why we hate your kind. Her laugh was bitter. Why my grandmother led the fleets that glassed 3 of your colonies? Why you're still here as second-class citizens 50 years after the armistice? Yes, he admitted. Something in her expression softened. She released his chin but didn't step back. That's why you're here. That honesty. She gestured to the holographic displays. What do you see, human? Ethan studied the floating images more carefully. The surveillance footage showed palace corridors, private meetings between her brothers and various nobles. The political networks displayed in red and gold showed allegiances and betrayals mapped like neural pathways. Someone's planning something, he said slowly. Your brothers? My brother Theron specifically, with support from House Vex and the military council. She waved her hand, and the displays shifted. In 3 days, during the Festival of Ascension, they plan to declare my father unfit to rule due to his illness. They'll call for an emergency coronation. Theron will take the throne, and his first act will be to void the Human Integration Treaty. That would mean expulsion of all humans from Valtherian space, or worse, if the military hardliners have their way, a return to proper subjugation. She turned away, her shoulders tense. 50,000 humans live in this system now. Your families, your children. Where will you go when we cast you out? Ethan felt the weight of her words. His sister had just given birth to his nephew here. His parents had retired to the human quarter after decades of service. This was home now. Why tell me this? Princess Calith turned back, and now there was something vulnerable in her expression. Because I need help, and everyone in this palace would sell me to my brothers for an advancement in rank. You have no stake in our politics, no reason to plot against me. And because, she stepped closer again, so close he could see the faint pattern of scales along her collarbones. Because you're the only person in this entire palace who looks at me like I'm a person, not a prize to be won or an obstacle to be removed. Her hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that felt shockingly intimate. Her skin was hot against his, and he felt a current pass between them. Not electricity, but something deeper. I can't do this alone, she whispered. I have evidence, but I need someone who can move freely, someone they won't suspect. Someone brave enough to walk into a princess's chambers when summoned by a woman they should fear. I'm not brave, Ethan said, his voice rough. I'm terrified right now. Good. That means you're smart. She smiled, and it transformed her face from coldly beautiful to something warmer. Will you help me, Ethan? Will you help me save your people and mine? He should refuse. Every survival instinct screamed at him to walk away from palace intrigue, to keep his head down and hope the storm passed. But looking into her eyes, feeling the tremor in her hand where it held his, he found himself nodding. Tell me what you need. Princess Calith led Ethan to a hidden alcove behind a decorative screen, where a small table held a crystal datasphere. She activated it with a touch, and the air filled with intercepted communications. Audio files of her brother Theron, coordinating with military commanders, video of secret meetings, financial records showing bribes and weapons purchases. The evidence is damning, she explained, her hand still loosely holding his as they stood close together in the confined space. But getting it to the Council of Houses before the festival requires someone who won't be searched. Servants pass through the noble quarters freely. You could... A chime echoed through the room. Someone at the door. Calith's eyes widened. The surveillance sweep. I forgot. They do random security checks after dark. She looked at Ethan, then at the sealed door, calculating. If they find you here, they'll assume we're conspiring. Which we are, but what do we do? She made a decision in an instant, pulling him toward the sleeping alcove, a raised platform with flowing curtains and cushions that glowed softly. We give them something else to assume. Quickly. What? Trust me, and follow my lead. She pulled him onto the platform and began unfastening the clasp of her garment. Don't question it. Just be here with me. The door chime sounded again, more insistent. Caliph touched a control, and the curtains around the sleeping alcove became semi-opaque, allowing shadows to be visible from outside, but obscuring details. She pulled Ethan down beside her, her hands moving to the fastenings of his tunic. Your Highness, we must perform the security scan, a guard's voice called. Enter, Caliph called back, her voice deliberately breathless. But you dare disturb me at your peril. The door unsealed. Ethan heard boots on the polished floor, multiple guards from the sound of it. His heart hammered as Caliph pressed against him, her body warm and real and impossibly close. She'd removed the outer layer of her garment, leaving only a thin underlayer that revealed the elegant lines of her form. Position yourself, she whispered in his ear, so quietly he barely heard. Make it convincing. He understood. His hands found her waist, trembling slightly, and she shifted to drape herself partially across him, her silver hair falling like a curtain around them both. To anyone looking from outside the translucent curtain, they would appear to be in the midst of an intimate encounter. Your Highness, the guard captain's voice was strained with embarrassment. We must scan the room. Regulations require... Then scan and leave, Caliph interrupted, letting irritation color her tone. But note in your report that I will speak with your commander about the timing of these intrusions. Ethan felt her breath against his neck, warm and rapid. Her hands rested on his chest, and he could feel her heart beating as quickly as his own. What had started as a desperate deception began to feel like something more, as her fingers traced patterns on his skin where she'd pushed aside his tunic. Their faces were inches apart in the shadowy enclosure. Nothing detected, Highness, the guard reported after tense moments. We apologize for the intrusion. See that it doesn't happen again. Caliph's voice carried royal authority even in her supposedly vulnerable position. Seal the door on your way out. Full privacy protocols. The guards retreated, and the door sealed with a heavy thunk. Still, neither Ethan nor Caliph moved for several long moments. The pretense should have ended, but something held them frozen in place. Her hand still splayed across his chest, his fingers still pressing into the curve of her waist. That was... Ethan started. Necessary, Caliph finished, but her voice was uncertain. She pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. In the glow of the alcove, her face was impossibly beautiful, and her expression held a mixture of relief and something else, something hungry and afraid at once. We should, he began. She kissed him. It was sudden and fierce, her mouth claiming his with an intensity that drove all thought from his mind. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and he responded instinctively, one hand sliding up her back while the other tightened on her hip. She tasted like starlight and spice, and the heat of her skin was almost overwhelming. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Caliph's eyes were wide with shock at her own actions. That wasn't... She touched her lips, then looked at him. I don't know why I did that. I do, Ethan said quietly. The truth of it struck him with crystal clarity. Because you're lonely. Because everyone in this palace wants something from you, except the one person who can't possibly benefit from your favor. She laughed, a sound caught between pain and relief. Is that what you are? The one person who wants nothing? I didn't say that. His hand was still on her waist, his thumb tracing slow circles on her skin. I said I can't benefit from wanting you. There's a difference. They lay side by side on the cushions, the pretense abandoned, but neither willing to create distance. Caliph had wrapped a light covering around them both, not for warmth, as her people ran hot, but for a sense of intimacy, of creating a small world where palace politics couldn't reach. Tell me about Earth, she said softly, her head resting on his shoulder. Not the Earth from the history files. Your Earth. Ethan described autumn in New Hampshire, the smell of falling leaves and wood smoke. He told her about his mother's garden, his father's workshop, his sister's terrible cooking. Simple things, human things, memories of a world that felt impossibly distant from the crystalline spires and political machinations of Valtheris. It sounds peaceful, Caliph murmured. We have no seasons here. The climate is eternally controlled, perfect and unchanging. I think I'd like to see leaves fall from trees. Maybe someday you will. His fingers traced the patterns in her hair, which seemed to respond to his touch with faint luminescence. After all, this is over. If we survive it. She shifted, propping herself up on one elbow to look down at him. Tomorrow, I need you to take the datasphere to Lord Vexian's estate. He's one of the few nobles my brother hasn't corrupted, and he has the authority to call an emergency session of the council. How do I even get into a noble's estate? You'll pose as a maintenance technician, which you are. I'll send an official request for repairs to their primary atmospheric regulator. It's been making a high-pitched whine that drives Lady Vexian to distraction, so they won't question the timing. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. But it's dangerous. If Theron's people spot you, if they search you. I understand the risks. Do you? Her eyes searched his face. They won't just kill you, Ethan. My brother has creative methods for dealing with spies. Methods that would make you beg for simple execution. Then, I won't get caught. She leaned down, her forehead pressing against his. Why are you doing this? Really? You could run, take your family and flee to another system before the festival. Because you asked, he said simply. And because it's the right thing to do. And because... He pulled her down into another kiss, this one slower, deeper, full of things neither of them could say aloud. When they parted, she was trembling. This is impossible, you know. Even if we win, even if I take the throne, a human and a Valtherian royal, my people would never accept it. Your people would see it as collaboration with the enemy. Then it's good we're only focused on surviving the next 3 days, Ethan replied, though his heart ached with the truth of her words. We can worry about impossible later. She smiled sadly and nestled back against him, her hand finding his beneath the covering. They lay like that for a long time, drawing comfort from each other's presence, while the 3 moons tracked across the sky outside her window. There's something else I haven't told you, Caliph said eventually, about why I really need you. What? My father, he's not just sick. He's dying, and he knows about Theron's plans. Yesterday, he summoned me and told me something I wasn't supposed to know. Her voice dropped, barely a whisper. I'm not his biological daughter. My mother was his second wife, but I was born from a genetic merger with a human surrogate, part of an early experiment in hybrid genetics during the war. It's why my skin shimmers differently, why my abilities are weaker than my brother's. I'm part human, Ethan, and if Theron discovers that secret, it won't just destroy my claim to the throne. It will give him justification to void the integration treaty entirely. Ethan's mind reeled. Does anyone else know? Only my father and the medical staff who were executed shortly after my birth to keep the secret, and now you. She turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with unshed tears. So you see, I'm not just asking you to help save the humans in this system. I'm asking you to help save me, because in their eyes, I'm one of you. A contamination. A monster. He pulled her close, feeling the tremors running through her body. You're not a monster. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Even knowing what I am? Especially knowing what you are. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the bridge of her nose. You're proof that our species don't have to be enemies, that we can be something better together. She kissed him again, and this time it was desperate, fierce with need and fear and hope all tangled together. They clung to each other as the hours passed, finding solace in whispered conversations and soft touches, building a fragile bridge between 2 worlds in the darkness of her chambers. Ethan left before dawn, slipping through the service corridors with the data sphere hidden in a false panel of his toolkit. His lips still tingled from Caliph's goodbye kiss, and his mind raced with everything that had passed between them in the night. He'd crossed a line from which there was no return. The repair request came through on schedule. By mid-morning, he was at the Vexian estate, a sprawling complex of gardens and pavilions on the city's edge. Lord Vexian himself greeted him, a stately older Valtherian with deep green skin and eyes like polished amber. "The atmospheric regulator is this way," the Lord said, leading him through a private study. But as soon as they were alone, he sealed the door. "Princess Calith sent word you were coming. Show me what you have." Ethan handed over the data sphere. Lord Vexian's expression grew darker as he reviewed the evidence, his hands trembling with rage or fear or both. "This is worse than I imagined," he muttered. "The military council backing Theron means they're planning a full coup, not just a succession dispute. They'll purge anyone who opposes them, restructure the government." He looked at Ethan with new respect. "You realize you've made yourself a target by bringing this to me?" "I know." "And the princess? She trusts you?" "Yes." Lord Vexian studied him for a long moment. "There are rumors, you know. Whispers that she's been seen with a human, that she's compromised herself. If her enemies catch wind of a relationship between you—" "Let them whisper," Ethan said with more courage than he felt. "We have 2 days to stop this. What do we do?" Over the next 48 hours, Ethan became Lord Vexian's shadow, carrying messages to other nobles loyal to the old king, setting up secret meetings, and gathering additional evidence, all while maintaining his normal duties and trying not to reveal the exhaustion weighing on him or the constant fear that Theron's spies would discover their plot. He saw Calith only once more before the festival, a chance encounter in a crowded corridor where they could exchange only brief glances. But in her eyes, he read volumes, determination, fear, and something that made his heart race. The Festival of Ascension dawned with celebrations throughout the city. Ethan dressed in his formal servant's attire and made his way to the throne room, where thousands had gathered. On the raised dais, King Velroth sat slumped in his crystalline throne, clearly dying. Theron stood to his right, confident and regal. Princess Calith stood to the left, her face a mask of calm. The ceremony began. Prayers were offered, traditions observed. Then, as planned, Theron stepped forward. "Lords and ladies of the realm," his voice boomed across the chamber. "It pains me to speak plainly, but our beloved father can no longer fulfill his duties. For the good of Valtheris, I call for—" "You call for treason." Lord Vexian's voice cut through the crowd. He strode forward, other nobles flanking him. "We have evidence of your conspiracy, Prince Theron. Evidence of bribes, of plots, of plans to seize the throne through deception." The throne room erupted in chaos. Theron's supporters moved to intercept Lord Vexian. Guards drew weapons, and in the confusion, assassins struck. Ethan saw them moving toward Calith, 3 figures in servant's garb, blades glinting. He didn't think, just ran, shouting a warning. He reached her just as the first assassin struck, pushing her aside and taking the blade meant for her across his shoulder. Pain exploded through him, but he stayed on his feet, grabbing the assassin's wrist and twisting. Calith's guards reached them, cutting down the attackers. She caught Ethan as he staggered, her hands pressing against his wound, her eyes wild with fear and fury. "Get him to the medical wing," she commanded. Then, rising to her full height, power radiating from her in waves that made the air shimmer. "Enough!" Her voice carried a harmonic that silenced everyone. Every Valtherian in the room felt it, a pulse of pure authority, of royal power unleashed. Blood from Ethan's wound stained her hands as she held them up for all to see. "You want to know why I trust this human?" she called out. "Why I've allied with Lord Vexian in the Reform faction? Because a human just saved my life while my own brother sent assassins to kill me. Because the old hatreds, the old wars, they're chains holding us all back." She turned to her father, who struggled to sit upright. "Father, tell them the truth about me." King Velroth's voice was weak but clear. "Princess Calith is of mixed heritage, created during the war as an experiment in peace. She is both Valtherian and human. She is the future I hoped for, a bridge between our peoples." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Theron's face twisted with triumph. Then she has no legitimate claim. She's contaminated, impure. She is my heir, the king interrupted. Chosen not because of her blood, but because of her character. Because she values life over pride, peace over conquest. He looked at his daughter with infinite sadness and love. The old ways are dying with me. Choose better. The king slumped back. His breathing labored. Guards surrounded Theron, whose coup had collapsed in spectacular fashion. As they led him away, Caliph knelt beside Ethan, who was being tended by medical staff. "You idiot," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful, stupid, brave idiot." "You're worth it," he managed, though the pain was making him dizzy. "You're worth everything." The throne room gradually cleared, leaving them in relative privacy. Medical staff worked on Ethan's wound, serious but not fatal. Caliph held his hand throughout, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the weight of history shifting around them. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now?" She smiled through her tears. "Now I become queen of a very confused realm, and you become the most controversial figure in two-species history, the human who stole a princess's heart and maybe saved both our peoples. I can live with that." "Good." She kissed him, and this time, there was no need to hide, no guards to deceive. Just two people from different worlds, choosing each other despite every impossibility. "Because you're not getting away from me now, Ethan Drake. I'm keeping you." "Your Majesty is very demanding." "Get used to it, human," she smiled. "You whispered back. You came to my room after dark. Now you're stuck with me." Outside, the three moons rose over a city transformed. The festival continued, but now it celebrated not just tradition, but the beginning of something new. A half-human princess would take the throne, and beside her would stand a human engineer who'd been brave enough to answer a whispered summons. Some would call it scandal. Others would call it hope. Caliph and Ethan called it love, and that was enough. The end.